Hi, this is Juliet Love is Beginning with a Course in Miracles reading. And today we have Chapter 5, Healing and Wholeness, Section 4, Teaching and Healing. What fear has hidden still is part of you. Joining the atonement is the way out of fear. The Holy Spirit will help you reinterpret everything that you perceive as fearful and teach you that only what is loving is true. Truth is beyond your ability to destroy, but entirely within your ability to accept. It belongs to you because as an extension of God you created it with Him. It is yours because it is part of you, just as you are part of God because He created you. Nothing that is good can be lost because it comes from the Holy Spirit, the voice for creation. Nothing that is not good was ever created, and therefore cannot be protected. The atonement is the guarantee of the safety of the kingdom, and the union of the sonship is its protection. The ego cannot prevail against the kingdom, because the sonship is united. In the presence of those who hear the Holy Spirit's call to be as one, the ego fades away and is undone. Oh, that rhymes. So my attention is drawn to the second sentence of that paragraph. The Holy Spirit will help you reinterpret everything that you perceive as fearful and teach you that only what is loving is true. So what is every day for? Reinterpretation. Bringing everything that I perceive as fearful, with no exceptions, to Spirit, and sitting at the feet of Spirit and being taught that only what is loving is true. What is sitting at the feet of Spirit, moving through my day, being willing to be taught and having experience and perception be used as the things that teach me under Spirit's guidance. So they're not real. Moving through an illusion, it's not real, but Holy Spirit's going to use what I believe in, what I perceive, what I experience, to teach me that only what is loving is true. So if we can remember that, today I'm willing to learn that only what is loving is true. I don't have to fear a world that's going to come at me. I don't have to fear punishment. I don't have to fear negative outcomes. If the purpose of this day is for me as wholly worthy, along with every other being who is wholly worthy, to learn to be taught by Spirit that only what is loving is true, then what does any of us have to fear? We have nothing to fear. Okay. Paragraph 2. What the ego makes, it keeps to itself, and so it is without strength. Its existence is unshared. It does not die, it was merely never born. Physical birth is not a beginning. It is a continuing. Everything that continues has already been born. It will increase as you are willing to return the unhealed part of your mind to the higher part, returning it undivided to creation. I have come to give you the foundation so your own thoughts can make you really free. You have carried the burden of unshared ideas that are too weak to increase, but having made them, you did not realize how to undo them. You cannot cancel out your past errors alone. They will not disappear from your mind without the atonement, a remedy not of your making. The atonement must be understood as a pure act of sharing. That is what I meant when I said it is possible, even in this world, to listen to one voice. If you are part of God and the sonship is one, you cannot be limited to the self the ego sees. So the atonement must be understood as a pure act of sharing. I can remember my willingness as I walk through the day to let everything speak to me with that one voice of Spirit. I don't have to worry if I get into situations where I'm not hearing the voice of Spirit through the situation, through those presenting as people, through everything I seem to look at. I don't have to worry if that's not the case yet. It's the purpose of the day to give up the old fearful ideas, to be taught this, to be shown this, to be led through experience. So what's the pure act of sharing? Spirit, the essence of what I am, if I give it freely and fully to everything without exception. Everything that I would see as separate when ego's talking to me. Every concept, every situation, every being, every object, every perceived particle, everything has joy as its nature. If I'm willing to remember this today, the entire world can speak to all of us with our one voice, our one actual voice. That's the pure act of sharing. You share all with all. There's only one thing to share with all, and all are all. So, yeah, it doesn't get more pure than the only thing there is. That's the only thing that's real. Okay, paragraph 3. Every loving thought held in any part of the sonship belongs to every part. It is shared because it is loving. Sharing is God's way of creating, and also yours. The ego can keep you in exile from the kingdom, but in the kingdom itself, it has no power. Ideas of the Spirit do not leave the mind that thinks them, nor can they conflict with each other. However, ideas of the ego can conflict because they occur at different levels, and also include opposite thoughts at the same level. It is impossible to share opposing thoughts. You can share only the thoughts that are of God and that He keeps for you, and of such is the kingdom of heaven. The rest remains with you until the Holy Spirit has reinterpreted them in the light of the kingdom, making them too worthy of being shared. When they have been sufficiently purified, He lets you give them away. The decision to share them is their purification. I was kind of laughing toward the end because when they have been sufficiently purified, He lets you give them away. That's what it feels like when I receive a message. It's like I'm given thoughts and they go through a filter. They can't get to me unless they've been sufficiently purified to be given away. So I don't know, that just kind of stirred something up in me as I read that. But the part that stands out for me is every loving thought held in any part of the sonship belongs to every part. So anybody we look upon, if we can remember this about them, more than what ego is telling us to see, more than what ego is telling us about any aspect of what ego calls their character or their experience or their blessings or their lack of blessings, because ego will misuse all of this. If we can remember that every loving thought held in any part of the sonship, that belongs to you. Whenever you're looking at anybody, if you can remember that about yourself, every loving thought held in any part of the sonship belongs to me. It belongs to everyone. And I find a lot of healing that takes place for me is just in thought, just when I'm thinking about somebody, because all minds are connected. So we bless each other. Sure, we have experiences and we have face-to-face experiences. I find the ego interferes with me a lot more when I'm having those, but I can also have more powerful experiences in the physical presence, the perception of the physical presence of other. But a lot of work gets done just in thought, just when I'm thinking of another. And if I can remember that the truest part about them is that every loving thought held in any part of the sonship belongs to them, without exception. Doesn't matter who they appear to be, then I'm in my right mind. And as we move through this awakening, we recognize this is right mind. We recognize the binary. This is wrong mind. I'm in wrong mind. I can be willing to be restored to right mind. So it is simple. It's difficult as we go through it because we have to face such layers of intensity that we've projected upon the world. Look at pedophilia, for example. What have we projected out there? I have videos where I've gone into this specifically. I don't feel the call to do that now. But everything I see out there that I label problem, I have projected. And the chickens are going to come home to roost, my friend. Is that the phrase? I don't even know. But they come home and then you feel absolutely terrible, really awful, when your projection comes back to you and shows itself. But Holy Spirit is right there to restore you to right-mindedness. even when you stop projecting that stuff out on somebody else and you allow it to be healed in the mind. Worship of youth, for example. There's a distorted form of it we would project out there and see out there. But then it comes home and we can allow it to be healed. Didn't know it was going to go that way. Okay. Paragraph 4. I heard one voice because I understood that I could not atone for myself alone. Listening to one voice implies the decision to share it in order to hear it yourself. The mind that was in me is still irresistibly drawn to every mind created by God, because God's wholeness is in the wholeness of His Son. You cannot be hurt and do not want to show your brother anything except your wholeness. Show him that he cannot hurt you and hold nothing against him, or you hold it against yourself. This is the meaning of turning the other cheek. And why does this become apparent as we move through, as we move on? When we believe we've been hurt, how does that feel? Well, awful. And an example I have is sometimes when I'm playing with my kids, somebody will get on top of my hair. And I've noticed when I feel the physical pain of having my hair tugged, there will be an exaggerated vocal exclamation, like, and then I'll think, oh, I feel the victim posture. Look at that. And what am I supposed to try not to? No, I don't have to try not to react that way. But in that moment of feeling the victim attitude, feeling something has happened to me, feeling the victim posture, that's an opportunity. I can actually stop in that moment and remember, show him that he cannot hurt you and nothing, and hold nothing against him, or you hold it against yourself. So in that next moment, after I've heard myself go, and I've felt my reactiveness, I felt the whole story of what's happened to me, then I can enter immediately a moment of peace. Show him that he cannot hurt you and hold nothing against him, or you hold it against yourself. And that's a very mild example. What's another example? Oh, okay, mind to mind. I've had jealousy thoughts come up, and this is humbling to admit. I have to remember they're not mine, though. They're thoughts ego has sent me and that I believed and that I buried, I kept from my awareness. So the idea of people getting more attention than I'm getting, the idea of needing attention, and when somebody shows up getting more attention than I get, I'll have thoughts that have come up from the basement. They were just flooding me yesterday. Oh, here was one. I hate him. I hate him actually came up from the basement. I've suppressed these thoughts. I'm not used to hearing I hate this one and believing it's my thought. I've definitely suppressed that. But as I've been taught before, to see one blade of grass as separate from another blade of grass, that's ego's practicality. That's hatred. Hatred helps me see the computer monitor as separate from the keyboard. So hatred is ego's practicality. It's how it rolls. And so Spirit was explaining this so I wouldn't freak out. This was prior to hearing I hate you come up from my basement, and to feel the force with which I take a perceived separate entity and shove it away from me. It's like I could see if the physical representation would be a physically violent shove. So here's a beautiful example for me. If I see somebody out in the world physically shoving someone else and I feel distressed, do you know what I feel distressed about? I feel distressed that I hate you. And I hate me, because if that's the physical pushing, it's the projection. If I hate one of us, I hate all of us, myself. And that's his ego. I'm speaking his ego, which isn't real. The hatred isn't real. So do I actually hate you? No. But am I in a dream where I believe that hatred is practical and useful and separation is practical and useful? Yeah, I am. And so it's good to recognize that and to come into the pure willingness to be let out of it. And to, I would just say, don't be afraid to let those thoughts up out of the basement. Because if you let them up out of the basement and allow them to be healed, and it took about a day from yesterday, it was awful. I went through some really awful layers. And having new people in your environment can help you access thoughts that you suppress. So that's sometimes why we would resist that, why I would resist that. I had 2 additional kids in my home that I was taking care of yesterday, and I realized that, different minds, different thought patterns, although we're all in one mind, how I experience it is when I'm with someone who seems to be new, they will expose both loving thoughts that I feel a little bit different and unloving thoughts that feel a little bit different. So they're very helpful. All beings without exception are very, very helpful because they help us become aware of both our real and unreal thoughts, and they bring them up out of the basement. If we want to stop seeing it out there, we have to, that's a metaphor. I'm in my actual basement. And this year, we cleaned it out. We had bins and bins of toys and kid things down here, and we've made it into a more livable space. And my daughter's working with her friend on how she can redecorate it. And so the basement's being, restored, cleaned out. And what a metaphor. Yeah, if we let those thoughts up out of the basement and allow them to be healed today, then we don't have to see it out there anymore. Out there is to teach us to find the thought and let it go. It has a teaching purpose. So, yeah, I encourage you to not be afraid to go into your basement and to let it be cleaned. It's a service. So as ego, if you ever feel any disquiet, as that identity, you definitely, I'll just use I language so you can take what you want and leave what you don't want. I definitely hate everybody and myself. As ego, that's my job, to fear all of you, hate all of you, fear myself, hate myself. That's my job as ego. So whenever I feel any stress, tension, fatigue, physical pain, emotional pain, I'm identified as ego, and that's what ego does. So that's okay. That's not personal. That's, ego makes everything personal. It's just, in those hoarding shows, they have to let people in to help. And they might face the shame of, I've accumulated all this stuff and I've hidden it, and now I have to let it out into the open. What a beautiful example they are for us, to let all of that into the light, to allow it to be cleaned up for them, to allow their surroundings to be restored to a pristine, livable, peaceful state. So what a beautiful example everybody is. Okay, show him that he cannot hurt you, and hold nothing against him, or you hold it against yourself. Okay, paragraph 5. Teaching is done in many ways, above all by example. Teaching should be healing because it is the sharing of ideas and the recognition that to share ideas is to strengthen them. I cannot forget my need to teach what I have learned, which arose in me because I learned it. I call upon you to teach what you have learned, because by so doing you can depend on it. Make it dependable in my name, because my name is the name of God's Son. What I learned I give you freely, and the mind that was in me rejoices as you choose to hear it. So what stands out for me there is teaching is done in many ways, above all by example. And what do I move through every day? All my teachers. Every blade of grass, every flower, every cloud, every perceived person, every object, everyone's my teacher. There aren't any exceptions. We have nothing but example. And if we try to get ego to interpret that, good luck. Ego can't do it. But if I ask Spirit, will you interpret all the teachings that are coming to me today? Will you help me? The answer is always yes. Okay. Teaching is done in many ways, above all by example. Okay, the Holy Spirit, this is paragraph 6, atones in all of us by undoing, and thus lifts the burden you have placed in your mind. By following him you are led back to God, where you belong, And how can you find the way except by taking your brother with you? My part in the atonement is not complete until you join it and give it away. As you teach, so shall you learn. I will never leave you or forsake you, because to forsake you would be to forsake myself and God who created me. You forsake yourself and God if you forsake any of your brothers. You must learn to see them as they are and understand they belong to God as you do. How could you treat your brother better than by rendering unto God the things that are God's? Okay, so what stood out is by following him, you are led back to God where you belong. And how can you find the way except by taking your brother with you? And what helps me to remember is the core of every brother I see, whether it's a physical object brother, concept brother, human brother, there's so many brothers. The core of everything I experience, I walk through, is that purity of the heart that leads me back to God. And more important than any analysis the ego would put upon everything I seem to walk through, everything I seem to experience, is the purity of that heart. And that's our burning desire, is to rejoin or to recognize our present joining with the purity of that heart and to be led home. Now, ego will kick up and do everything it can to prevent this and fight this, but once we get used to that's how ego rolls, we can learn to ignore these thoughts. When I'm in this state talking to you, the words flow very easily because they're given to me and I just report them. So during Julie's day, Julie fluctuates. Julie fluctuates in and out. Julie's lost, Julie's found, but I am grateful for the fact that everything, every situation, everyone is a teacher, everyone's leading me. As I recognize this, then I can be brought into this state where I can also show up as teacher. That's how it feels to me right now. By following him, the Holy Spirit, you are led back to God where you belong. And how can you find the way except by taking your brother with you? Okay, paragraph 7. The atonement gives you the power of a healed mind, but the power to create is of God. Therefore, those who have been forgiven must devote themselves first to healing, because having received the idea of healing, they must give it to hold it. The full power of creation cannot be expressed as long as any of God's ideas is withheld from the kingdom. The joint will of the sonship is the only creator that can create like the Father, because only the complete can think completely, and the thinking of God lacks nothing. Everything you think that is not through the Holy Spirit is lacking. So what stood out to me here is, therefore, those who have been forgiven must devote themselves first to healing, because having received the idea of healing, they must give it to hold it. And give all to all comes to mind here. If I want to live in my healing, hold the healing, be able to share the healing, I have to keep it moving. And so I have to let that healing infuse my experience, my thinking, my perception. And healing is something the Holy Spirit has an abundant supply, and it can keep me in the flow. The flow is the stream of healing. It can keep me there as I'm willing to stay there. But where I still believe thoughts from ego and get sidetracked is where I'm unwilling to stay there. And then it's painful to leave that flow, to leave that stream of healing. So I just have to remember to pause, to return, and to accept the healing that's here for me in every moment. Okay, paragraph 8. How can you who are so holy suffer? All your past except its beauty is gone, and nothing is left but a blessing. I have saved all your kindnesses and every loving thought you ever had. I have purified them of the errors that hid their light and kept them for you in their own perfect radiance. They are beyond destruction and beyond guilt. They came from the Holy Spirit within you, and we know what God creates as eternal. You can indeed depart in peace because I have loved you as I love myself. You go with my blessing and for my blessing. Hold it and share it, that it may always be ours. I place the peace of God in your heart and in your hands to hold and share. The heart is pure to hold it, and the hands are strong to give it. We cannot lose. My judgment is as strong as the wisdom of God, in whose heart and hands we have our being. His quiet children are his blessed sons. The thoughts of God are with you. That's so beautiful. And I can really feel the Shakespearean, the rhythm of iambic pentameter as I read sometimes. And it's I think it's a reflection of the holy stream of thought, the holy flow that's always here for all of us. What I know after I had a couple of big awakening experiences, and in the periods of cosmic consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, that follow that for a while, oh my goodness, did I see Shakespeare differently. I was just kind of exploding with, oh my gosh, he got it. He knew, he understood. Oh my gosh. Now that that's kind of faded away and I'm into the more practical, okay, let's clean the basement out. Because that has to be done. That has to be done. It has to be allowed. Now I'm not going after Shakespeare or studying or analyzing, but I still remember that burst of wonder and seeing, oh my gosh, he knew, he saw, look how it's all communicated. So it's everywhere. The teaching's everywhere. What stands out for me here is all your past except its beauty is gone, and nothing is left but a blessing. As we learn to not listen to the thoughts ego sends us, this statement brings us into the now so powerfully. And what we grant to ourselves, we can grant to everybody. In fact, that's how we grant it to ourselves. We can't really believe it for ourselves unless we grant it to everybody, no exceptions. I've discovered that where I make exceptions, I'm unwilling to give it to myself. So I could think of anybody and think this: all your past except its beauty is gone, and nothing is left but a blessing. I think of the people that I'm used to thinking of in certain ways. You're this, you're that, you're limited by this, you've got this condition. And now I just look at this: all your past except its beauty is gone, and nothing is left but a blessing. Oh my gosh, does that strike the heart? Is that ever a way to look at everybody? That's so helpful. Okay. So I'll just leave you with all your past except its beauty is gone. And nothing is left but a blessing. And as we perceive otherwise today, we can ask to have our perceptions corrected. So thanks for joining me today.